Hey everyone, how's it going? So I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself because I haven't had a chance to yet. This is actually my first video where I'll be speaking, but my name is Rich and I am a composer and trombone player, and I've been uploading music here for about 2 months now. These have mostly just been sketches and ideas I've accumulated over the last year. So I'm doing this because I actually am fresh off of maybe about a decade-long side quest away from serious music that somehow ended up with me becoming an industrial engineer. But over the last year or so, I found myself wanting to write music and make music again. So when I decided I was going to be a composer, I needed to figure out a way for me to study and learn so that I could become the writer that I wanted to become. And that's where the idea for this composer's journal came from. These studies are a way for me to become a better composer, but also rediscover things that I've definitely forgotten since I've been away from music, and of course, learn a couple of new things along the way. And I wanted to document that process as I go along. I am putting these up here because I wanted to show you guys exactly how I study, what I listen for, and how I turn these ideas and concepts into music of my own. So, in the long run, I have some pretty big plans for what I hope to accomplish with my music, but I have a lot of gaps in what I know versus what I need to know to achieve those things. So, with these journals, I take apart a piece of music, analyze it, deconstruct it, play with the parts inside of it, and use that information to inform my own writing skills and try to come up with a new piece at the end of it. Each of these journals also comes with a number of accompanying PDFs and other materials, which you can find through the links in the description. But so for today, this is my second study. The first journal is already up on the channel, but for this one, I wanted to try something different and actually talk through the process as I work. Today, we'll be looking at O Haupt, voll, Blut und Wunden, better known in English as O Sacred Head Now Wounded, and several of Bach's different harmonizations of the chorale in the St. Matthew Passion. So I picked this chorale today because I'm actually pretty familiar with it, at least as a performer. As a trombone player, you might be familiar with the recording of the Eastman Trombone Choir in Emory Remington from back in the 70s that's particularly famous. That setting, I believe, is number 44 here and number 62, and it was done by Howard Hanson. But also, what interests me here is that Bach doesn't just reuse the tune mechanically. Each version appears at a different dramatic point in the Passion with a different text and a different emotional function, so I want to hear how much of that gets reflected in the harmony. So I'm going to give a quick overview about these, just context within the St. Matthew Passion. I mentioned in my first study that I'm not really going to concentrate on text for right now. The text to these chorales is pretty inextricably linked. Like, you can't really separate them, but right now I'm just looking at them from a musical and harmonic standpoint. Future studies, I'll probably get into things like text painting and how that text interacts with all these really cool harmonies that are in each of these three settings. But for now, we're going to just take a look at the music. So the first setting we're going to look at here is number 44, Befiehl, deine, Wege, which, apologies if my German's bad. I did study it once. It's just been a really long time. But roughly in English, that is entrust your way or commit your way. This happens during the scene before Pilate. Jesus is being accused, he remains silent, and the chorale steps outside the immediate action with a text about trust and providence. Entrust your path and your troubles to the one who guides the heavens. So before I analyze anything, I'm listening for whether the major mode setting carries some of that sense of assurance or stability, especially knowing that the narrative is about to turn much darker. The second setting is number 54, O Haupt, voll, Blut und Wunden. This is the one most directly associated with O Sacred Head. It comes immediately after Jesus has been mocked, crowned with thorns, spat on, and struck. The choral text directly responds to that image. O head full of blood and wounds, full of pain and mockery. So here the relationship between the dramatic action and the chorale is extremely direct. This is also the version I'm going to use as my main analytical model, so I'll come back to it in much greater detail. The third is number 62, Wenn, einmal, soll, scheiden. This comes immediately after the death of Jesus, but the text does something interesting. Instead of simply continuing to contemplate Christ's death, it turns inward. The speaker essentially says, when my own death comes, do not leave me. Remain with me and deliver me through your own suffering. So the same melody is now being used not just to observe Christ's suffering, but to identify personally with it. So I'm thinking of these three broadly as trust, contemplation of suffering, and identification with death. I don't want to decide in advance that every chromatic note is some kind of theological symbol. All I'm trying to do is listen first and notice what the harmony actually makes me feel. I'm going to mark anything that immediately catches my ear, such as bass motions, a chromatic chord, a cadence, a suspension, some change in color, and then I'm going to analyze the harmony, especially using number 54 as the base model. After that, I'm going to come back to these other two settings and ask some more informed questions, such as what exactly did Bach change when he reharmonized this melody, and why does it affect the character so much? Ultimately, that's the part I care about compositionally. I'm not studying these just to label the chords. I want to understand what Bach is doing well enough that I can take some of those principles into my own realization and eventually into an original piece of music that I'm going to write from this study. So let's go ahead and have a listen through all three of these. If you see me on screen marking up some parts, I'm going to come back to them later, mainly in number 44 and number 62. So actually, before we get going, I'm going to go ahead and just mark up some stuff right now that I liked. So I really liked this measure. I like the B major chord here. So what I said before is we're going to analyze these, but we're going to do it after the fact, because I'm going to compare them to number 54. So we got these. I like the suspensions that are in there. Doesn't have to be pretty for now. Okay, that's good for now. So let's go on to the next one here. Actually, before I get going on that, I wanted to mention I'm preserving these in the original keys that they appear in. Something that I noticed about this being in D major is it has a, to me, more regal, grand, open feel. The D major sonority in there gives it that color, I think. Whereas the voicing of this next one is a little bit more somber. If you notice here immediately, the voices are higher up than down here. So let's go ahead and just move forward to this one now. Okay, so we're going to come back to this one in greater detail later, but for now, so I can remember, I like this. I like this part. Okay, so I like this here. This whole section, actually. Okay, we'll come back to this one in a little bit, but I want to keep going forward. So here's the third setting in A minor. This is the part that happens. It says, when I must one day depart, is roughly what that means in English. This was the one that comes immediately after the death of Jesus. I noticed that this one is much darker feeling, has a lot more chromatic motion. You can see all this non-chord tone behavior going on, especially right there. Yeah, that one's one of my favorite settings of this chorale. Just, I love the chromatic motion, and it's definitely something to mark up we'll come back to. Again, like I was saying, I'm not going to analyze every single note in this chorale, but at least parts of it. Mainly because I want to see what Bach is doing for when I make my own attempt later in the study to compose something. Yeah, this end phrase is really nice. Just to start, we'll end up going probably through some more later. But I want to dive into the next part, which is exactly how I go about breaking this stuff down. So I just wanted you guys to hear how these sound. Same chorale, 3 different harmonizations, 3 different moods within the St. Matthew Passion. So like I said, the main one we're going to start with is Haupt, voll, Blut, und Wunden. We're going to go ahead and analyze this. One of the first things that I do is take just the soprano and the bass. Spread these out here a little bit so that we have some space to work with, so that we're not just sitting up at the top there. Okay, so I strip out the inner voices. If you notice over here, because remember this is the one that we're going to be looking at, a lot of really interesting stuff going on inside the chorale. But I want to just know what the motion looks like on the outside, take a guess at some of the chords. Sometimes looking at all of this can overcomplicate it on a first pass. So what I'm looking for here is exactly stuff like this. So I like this motion here. I want to see how the voices are moving together. So they're moving in parallels, right? Like this. So I keep track of motion like that. So moving on, I like this nice motion we got. Like that, just in octaves. I study these because one of the things I find most fascinating about Bach's music is the way that these voices are moving. So, and again, these are approximations. You can see like sustained note moving. It's got kind of an oblique motion. I'm not trying to micromanage everything quite like this, but sometimes I think really seeing what's going on is interesting. And again, these are approximations, so this may not be what's happening at all. This is just my first impression of it. Okay, so let's analyze this real fast. So listening to it, key of D minor, going to F major, back to D minor. Okay, so one thing I like to do when I'm analyzing this is not just look at Roman numerals. I actually start with just using modern chord notation. So we're going to start like this. Oh, wrong one. There we go. So just D minor. And some of these are going to be best guesses for the time being. Like, I think this is B flat. It could be G minor. I don't know. I'm making an estimate. That looks like it's probably going to be F in first inversion, G minor, F. So, I don't know, G minor or B flat, something like that. Let's do that. So I'm assuming because this is a pivot of some kind, that's going to be an A, maybe A7, I can't remember, over C sharp. Again, I know we've looked at it already, listened to it, but I wasn't really paying attention theoretically. I was just trying to grab what was interesting to me. So then D minor motion, A dominant motion, and then to D minor. So broadly speaking, we're looking at D minor. We're going to this first phrase here. We're going to go to roughly F, or not roughly, we're going to F major, F, and then return to D minor. And this helps me, again, get an outline of where we're heading. We can tackle this, but I really want to know what the outer voices are doing and what the large areas are. So, taking a guess at analyzing. Did this backwards. So we got a chord. So this would be 1. We're kind of going towards F, and so I'm going to keep this as a new tonicization. This is going to be a dominant, so let's just go ahead and say D, B flat, F, G, F. I'm not sure yet. So this is a little bit of a tricky one for me. I hear it starting in D minor. We end up in F clearly. I would probably just, I'm going to take a stab. I'm going to call this in F. So this, because it kind of doesn't make sense to call this 6 in D minor when we're immediately going towards a tonicization of F. So let's go ahead and just say this. D. This is our pivot, so what's B flat major in D minor? So that's 6. Again, I'm doing this. It has been quite a while since I've had to analyze harmony like this. I kind of don't think about it this way anymore, but I wanted to exercise these muscles to get better. So that's going to give us a 4 chord if this is B flat in F. Again, this is preliminary. I kind of feel like this is stupid because it's a minor 1 going to this. The only reason I'm saying that this is a 1 is because of where we end up. But again, this is some modal interchange kind of going on a little bit, I guess you could say. So let's say this then ends up like this. So 1, 6. Now I'm thinking of it this way because I have a feeling, again, not trying to pay attention to over here at the moment, but I have a feeling that, I mean, if you think about it, it kind of makes more sense, whereas that's suspicious to me. But if this is a minor 4 in D minor, and then F is a major 3, I don't know. That doesn't really track to me, especially because of what happens here. This is clearly, if this is G minor, 2, 5, 1, and F. So let's go ahead and just call it that. 2, first inversion. 5, and 1. Now, I don't really see this C sharp as prepared. It seems to be just a direct pivot into this D minor. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this 5, 6. Making some guesses here, but this looks like it'll probably be a passing tone of some kind. Same here. So I'm going to concentrate there. Pick some of that up. Apologies if this is a little bit of a mess. So we'll come back to exactly what's going on here with the cadential motion, but I'm going to go ahead and say that this is just all 5. When I analyze this stuff at this stage, it's broad strokes. Just get a good idea of what we're doing. So something I want to check because I forgot to put the fermatas there. Just to mark these, that way we can kind of keep track of each phrase. All right, so let's see here. Have a listen, just kind of thinking about it in this context again. Okay, cool. Good enough for now. So let's see. Yeah, coming back to this one here, I think this is a modulation to D minor, and this is a new tonal area. This one here, you could make an argument, I guess, that this is like a minor 6 going to 4 like that. I don't know. It feels pretty D minor-y to me to be at the beginning. Like D minor and then moves out of D minor to F major. My goal with these, I'm not really like a pro 100% Roman numeral analysis guru. I'm trying to get a little bit better at it because, again, I did this maybe close to 20 years ago now, but I understand what's going on in terms of the harmony, like especially outlining it like this and how they function, how they move together. Really, the important thing is to understand how, like for me in terms of composing, is how all of this moves, because I like seeing this kind of motion. It makes me want to understand like what exactly Bach is doing there. Same thing going up and down. I just don't at this point think too much about this. It's a D minor chord. It goes to a B flat major chord, at least in terms of this listen right now. And that kind of is how I think about it, as opposed to like 1 to 6 or 1 to 4, whatever you want to call it. So let's just go ahead and move on here to the rest of it. We'll start here after the repeat. Okay, so moving on to the next part, let's listen here to the end. So kind of thinking like we did here, we're going to just map out the broad strokes. So like this first part, we started in D minor, moved to F, and returned to D minor. Same thing, this part. This part. Takes us to F. So we go from D minor, and then we move over towards an F major tonicization. The same thing, we go from F to G minor here. We end up on a D major chord. I know it's a D major, this is a half cadence of some kind. So making this assumption because of this F sharp right here. So let's go ahead and say this becomes D major. Notate it as a half cadence. So let's say right there, we're going to call that G minor. Looks like I lost my bottom staff, so 1 second, let me just pull this back up. Okay, great. All right, so going through, we're going to keep this in D minor. Let's take a look at our outer voice chord again. So again, broad strokes, I think these are, I'm making some best case guesses on what some of these chords are for the time being. So let's say B flat. And I want to say that this probably is a C over G. I can make a guess on F. F. G minor. This F sharp is a non-chord tone in F. And so we're going to guess that that is going to be a D7 over F sharp. G minor. This is a neighbor tone of some kind. And that, again, it's a D major, but I'm going to mark it there. Because if this is in G minor, this is basically a type of half cadence. So this pivots us to, it sounds like C major. Based on these notes, B and F, I'm going to go ahead and call that a G7 in first inversion. Remember, this is just our general tonal area that we're marking up. So C, that's F in first inversion. I guess C in second inversion. Cadence. So this is going to be probably F, and then G, C. Now this sets us up to go back to here, F. So F, guessing G minor, because in F2, probably 1, and then a dominant motion here. Okay, cool. So this is the broad motion of what I'm seeing so far, harmony-wise. Let's take a look at the way these voices move again. Bach has a lot of these parallel motions. We got an oblique right there, roughly. Contrary, moving apart, and then moving towards each other. I like that. I keep track of that because I come back to it when I'm composing music to see how my voices move. So let's go ahead and mark this up in the score. Okay, so broadly here, we move up, down, and then kind of oblique and down. So let's say this. So I'll leave that. Again, it's kind of an oblique motion. The bass gives it that stepwise motion though. So let's see. Even though this moves, I'm going to call it oblique-ish. But again, kind of looking over there, we already know that it kind of holds on right there, moves down. But again, we'll come back to it. But I like how this sets us up into that. And same. So then from there, this moves up and down. So that F moves down to E, B moves up to C. Remember, C major area, this isn't a C major chord. Some more parallel motion here. And then this line. Let's go from here. They go towards each other. And then, of course, exponential motion to the end. Okay, so keeping that in mind, we're moving to this F major area. So this is a 1 in D minor, but I'm going to call this the pivot. So that would be a 6 chord in F major. That's a G minor. It's a 2. To a 1-6. So B flat, 4 chord in F, and this would be a 5-6-4. Sorry, I like to do it 6-4. There we go. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Got our 4. And then we go to F, which is our 1. Now, I'll have to take a look at the chorale. For now, I'm going to just call this a 2-6. Going to the 5-6-5 of 2. I'll kind of need to think about this one, whether or not this is really all G minor. Or rather, if it's all G minor in terms of we're modulating. I mean, there's a lot of like 2, 2, 2, and then this is going to be the 5 of 2. If we think of it in F. I think it'd be better to think of this in G minor. It's clearly a tonicization of it, but like I said, I'm going to wait until I look at the full analysis to really make a final determination. So I'm going to call that a 5-6-5 in C. So we're going to call this a direct modulation. So the only reason I haven't done that here is, again, it's just so short that I want to take a look over here and see what's really going on before I make the final call. So, okay. Clearly we go into C major here, which sets us up. So, to go back to F major. So we're going to call this 1 in C. Which should make this a 4-6. make this a passing 6/4 chord. Now, I personally label these as passing 6/4 like this. It can be a 1/6/4. It honestly doesn't really matter to me, again, as long as you know what's happening. I'm sure there's going to be a theorist or two out there that won't like that response, but again, it matters more that you understand the motion here, which will become clear as we take a look at the full harmonization. Just move this down. Oh, yeah. Now this is going to be a direct modulation back to F. 2, 5, 1. Nice, okay. So here we have a look at what motion is going on between the outer voices, the rough tonal areas of each of these, and we can clarify some of the modulations here as we go into the full chorale. So keeping some of this in mind, we're going to investigate this. I'm going to go ahead and just say this is a tonicization of G minor and not just twos like this. It would make more sense. But again, we'll take a closer look at the chorale. So let's have a listen now and see if this comes across differently to us now that we've actually had a chance to kind of pull some of it apart. Still having problems with this one in terms of this clearly goes to D minor. I want to say that this starts in D minor, but we immediately move to F. It could be a 6. Again, I don't know. I'll have to have a think about this in terms of the context of the chorale. Let's move on here to the rest of it. Yeah, I think that definitely modulates to G minor. Okay, so let's go ahead and leave this here. I like this so far. It gives us a rough outline. Again, a lot of these chords are just kind of my best guess at the moment. I know this is right here. I have not been looking at this. I've just been trying to listen and analyze. I'm looking for, whenever I do these outer voice reductions like this, like I said earlier, the motion of the voices, seeing these parallel motions, seeing what's sustained, what's moving, if they're moving towards each other. A lot of times this creates a lot of really nice motion through the harmony in Bach's music. One of the reasons I'm looking at these is because I noticed that my own writing tended to have really static melodies like this. Like, and it's nice sounding, it's pretty, but it is like chord, 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 pretty melody, pretty melody, pretty melody. Part of the reason for that is because I'm not really that great of a piano player. And so I wanted to understand how especially the inner voices moved. Now to get that, I think you got to really understand how the outer voices move and the shape and the outline of what's going on. I wanted to know how Bach would move chord and note and note and note like that. Each one of these is a different chord and how you move from this area to this area. So really broadly speaking, in terms of harmony, what I heard was D minor to F. Our questions are this minor 1 or whether it's a 6. I'm still kind of leaning towards 1 and then having this as the pivot directly into F, but I don't know. Either way, my thoughts on Roman numerals kind of vary. I think it's important to try to understand it as best as possible, but I also tend to just analyze stuff like this. I come from a jazz background as well, and think a lot of times in chords this way. Roman numerals help us assign function, whether it's really this like 6 in terms of D minor versus a 4 in F. You don't normally hear it in terms of the F context. From here, I always hear it more in terms of the D minor. But if you're looking ahead, it makes more sense that it would go into this note. I don't know. This is one of the areas that I want to improve on while I'm doing this stuff. So don't take this as a gold standard. A lot of it might be wrong, but I understand in terms of the notes moving. What I'm really trying to get is the sense of motion and direction that Bach creates through these phrases. I understand the theory enough and the harmony enough to get what he's doing. I guess I'm trying to say I don't necessarily care if I can explain it as well as I need to for a theory class. Or I want to try to explain it my best to you guys, but whether I understand it as well as I need to in terms of that. So some of these are up for debate, but big thing is hearing the tonal areas and then, of course, seeing the direction of the phrases. So let's go ahead and move on to the full chorale.